Hello, and welcome to Bubsa's Dharma Lounge, a place and a time for relaxed exploration of all things Dharma. In this episode, I'll be sharing an introduction to meditation, as well as a short guided meditation. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, I'm Poep Sa Frank Jude, and before we're getting into the topic of meditation, I want to express my gratitude and appreciation to the supportive feedback I've been getting, and in particular to Andre Talbot for his dana that went to, specifically earmarked, a podcast mic. So if the sound sounds any better, then we all owe it to Andre with gratitude and appreciation. So, meditation. I don't understand sometimes why meditation has become such a esoteric kind of concept, or on the other hand, pretty much dumbed down. It seems like there's no nuance when meditation is discussed. There's a famous quote from Suzuki Roshi: "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few." But it's my experience, teaching for the last 30 years or so, that many beginners actually come with a mind filled with misinformation, with expectations, presuppositions, assumptions, and fears and anxieties around meditation. So I want to spend some time in disabusing any of you who might be beginners, or even some of you who might be practitioners, but who might have been taught from a very limited or polemical position. And that's really the cause for so much confusion. Many teachers, many groups offer instruction on meditation, which is a very sectarian practice, but they use universalist kind of terms. And then, what happens is that sometimes words are used that are the same, like the word concentration. But if we don't really clearly define our term, two different teachers could mean different things about concentration, right? So there's the name Frank. Are you talking about Frank Jude or Frank Sinatra, right? So you've got to really be clear. On the other hand, sometimes different words are used and made a big thing of, but when you really investigate what's being discussed, you realize that these different terms are referring to the same referent or the same concept, right? So for instance, there are members in my Sangha who only know me as Bubsa. They don't know my natal birth name at all, right? Others only know Frank Jude and they don't know my Dharma name, but they're both me, right? So we really want to be clear, and that's what I like to try and do when I'm teaching. And so I'm going to begin by saying that all meditation begins with concentration. And that statement will already raise the hackles on a group like the TM people, right? I have heard over and over again over the years TM teachers saying, often putting down mindfulness and other forms of meditation because it requires concentration and you don't need to concentrate to do TM, transcendental meditation. But in fact, TM is simply mantra meditation, and you're being asked to observe and repeat a mantra, to let go of everything else, and keep coming back to the mantra if you do get hooked and all that. That's concentration. And I think the problem is that many people might think of concentration as something very strenuous, that you have to really bear down and force yourself to concentrate. But right concentration is a very relaxed, light kind of concentration. So, for instance, think of a time when you've been so engrossed in a movie or a book, right? So absorbed that someone calls your name and you don't hear them. It's like everything else just fades away. Well, you were concentrated. That's a very one-pointed focus of attention. And you're not struggling, right? You're not struggling to pay attention to the movie. Why? Because you're engrossed in it. And I've heard other people say that, like children, for instance, have very uh, limited focus of attention. But in fact, again, even so-called, children with so-called ADH, attention deficit disorder and all, if there's something that they're interested in, they stay pretty focused. I've seen children engrossed in Lego for hours, or Roblox or Minecraft for hours, right? So it's really about, um, can we find a kind of pleasure in it? Um, and a relaxed, focused attention is all that's meant by concentration. Now, all meditation also involves mindfulness. And in fact, the Buddha referred to concentration and mindfulness as faculties. And what that means is the faculty, you already have the faculty to concentrate, to be mindful. It's part of our human nature. It's in there, so to speak, right? We're built with it. We all have this ability. But he also referred to concentration and mindfulness as powers. And if we're honest, we can see, from our own experience that some people definitely temperamentally have a stronger power of concentration than others, right? But again, because they're a faculty, we all have it, and as a power, we can strengthen it. But even there, it's important to keep in mind that the power varies, right? I have a stronger power of concentration if I'm well rested. But if I've been up all night, either, anxious about finances or worried because my daughter has been running a fever all night, then I'm not going to have as much power the next day, right? So I have to take all of that into account, right? But all meditation does involve concentration and mindfulness. And then it becomes a matter of, what are you emphasizing? Right? But let me read a passage from the Anguttara Nikaya, which is an ancient Pali collection of texts. And this is allegedly, the words of the Buddha. Two things will lead you to supreme understanding. What are those two? Tranquility and insight. Now, in Pali, the word that is being translated here as tranquility is samatha. Samatha is tranquility because when you're concentrated, nothing bothers you, right? If you get so focused, you lose awareness of everything else. So it's tranquility. Right? Insight, well, the Pali word for that is vipassana. And that emphasizes vipassana, mindfulness. So when we're emphasizing concentration, it's said that we're practicing samatha meditation. When we emphasize mindfulness, vipassana or insight meditation. But again, all meditation includes both of these, right? When I'm concentrating on a mantra or my breath or whatever, of an image, it's mindfulness that sees when the mind has wandered. And then it's concentration that brings it back. Right? So when we're emphasizing concentration, mindfulness is like an adjunct. But when we're emphasizing mindfulness, well, we still have to concentrate the mind at least to a level of unification so that we don't just fly off the handle with the first thought that comes in and get gone with the wind, right? Carried away. So again, two things will lead to supreme understanding. What are those two? Tranquility, concentration, and insight, mindfulness. If you develop tranquility, concentration, what benefit can you expect? Your mind will develop. The benefit of a developed mind is that you are no longer a slave to your impulses. If you develop insight, mindfulness, what benefit will it bring? You will find wisdom. And the point of developing wisdom is that it brings you freedom from the blindness of ignorance. A mind held bound by unconsidered impulse and ignorance can never develop true understanding. But by way of tranquility and insight, concentration and mindfulness, the mind will find freedom. So those of you who are watching on YouTube, I've made these very DIY little drawings, but I will describe them for those who are listening in audio. Neuroscientists tell us that our normal default mode of the mind is wandering. And that's not inherently necessarily a problem, right? Lots of creativity comes from wandering. But when we want to be more focused, if we haven't cultivated that ability, then every thought comes in, we get carried away. We believe the thoughts, and just go scattered from one place to the next. So imagine, if you will, a funnel, right? Wide open at the top, right? And that's the wandering mind up here. And then it narrows down, but now imagine this funnel is sealed at the bottom. And as you move down, you are concentrating, focusing on single point. And if you get there, that's called one-pointedness, right? That's concentration, that's samatha, right? Everything outside that funnel, you actually are not aware of anymore. So therefore, it's tranquil. Nothing can bother you because you're literally not perceiving anything outside of that one-pointedness. Right? There's a beautiful poem by Li Po. The last of the clouds have left the sky. No more birds. Just the mountain and me, and then just the mountain. Right? So a kind of absorption, which again in some traditions is called samadhi. So in concentration, you're focusing on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. The mind wanders, mindfulness sees it, comes back. If you get to that one-pointedness, it's blissful, very tranquil. If we're emphasizing mindfulness, vipassana, then think of an hourglass, right? So at the top of the hourglass, you've got the wandering mind. You have to focus down, but you don't have to get to exactly one-pointedness, right? Think of the narrow point of the hourglass, but now the mind is down at that narrow point, not at the top. So it's unified, it's collected. And from that place, the mind no longer wanders or moves. You can open your field of awareness. And when anything comes into the field of awareness, the lower part of the hourglass, you're aware of it. But because the mind is stabilized, you don't cling to something if it's pleasant. You don't get caught in aversion if it's unpleasant. And you don't fall asleep if it's neutral. And when whatever it is that you're aware of leaves the field of awareness, you don't go after it. Right? So that's emphasizing mindfulness. These are the two faculties, elements, and powers necessary for any meditation. So our meditation that I'm going to introduce now is a mindfulness meditation, but you'll notice that in the very beginning, we begin with a little bit of that focusing to collect and unify our awareness. We'll be using our breath, and the guidance that I'll be offering you is really based on the opening of the anapanasati, which is mindfulness of in and out breathing. But it's also the very opening of the satipatthana, which is another discourse introducing what are called the four domains of mindfulness. They're more popularly known as the four foundations or the four establishments of mindfulness. But I prefer domain because it's not so much that we build mindfulness upon these objects, but we bring mindfulness to the domain of, in this case, the breath and the body. So I invite you to take a really comfortable seat. Ideally, even if you're sitting in a chair, your knees are a little bit lower than the top of the hips, right? The top of the pelvic hip bones. If you're sitting on the ground, again, your knees should be lower than that. You're sitting on a pillow or a blanket. You can rest your hands on your lap and gently close your eyes and drop your attention down to your belly and see if you can feel the belly rising and falling. If you're not sure you can feel the belly rising and falling, you might want to place a hand on your belly and exaggerate it just for a moment so it feels like the belly is inflating like a balloon as you inhale, deflating, relaxing as you exhale. And once you've got a sense of that movement, just relax your hands on your lap, and within a few breaths, you'll notice that maybe another thought comes into your mind. That's fine. That's what minds do. Notice it. That's mindfulness. And come back to the movement of the belly, rising and falling. Don't make it a problem. The mind wanders, and you come back with the lightness of a butterfly settling onto a flower. Now, if the mind feels very agitated as we begin, there is a technique that some people find helpful. You might want to try. It's called labeling or noting. So it's kind of a mental whisper to yourself, very quietly. It should never dominate. It's the movement of the belly rising and fall that's really what you're resting your attention on. And then you're adding this little label, rising, falling, rising, falling. The mind will wander, and now you just label it thinking. Notice the tone of voice, especially thinking. If it has even a hint of irritation, thinking, then say it again with a little smile in your voice, thinking. Because that moment of seeing the mind wandering is a strong, energetic moment of mindfulness. It's not anything to get irritated with. We should appreciate it. And then back to rising, falling. If the labeling gets in the way, just let it go. Now, if this were all we were to do, we'd be really emphasizing samatha, that concentration. But now notice I'm going to invite you. You're still observing the breath, but now become more curious about the characteristics of breathing. By that I mean notice that some breaths are long, some breaths are short. The breath may go very shallow, and then all of a sudden a deep breath comes in. Breaths can be fast or slow, smooth or rough. You may notice that it changes over time. If the mind grows really settled and curious, you might notice how different the beginning of an in-breath is from the middle and the end. How even over the body of the breath, there's constant change. You may grow more aware of the little gap between the end of the exhalation and the beginning of the inhalation. Curiosity might lead you to wonder, is there such a gap between the in-breath and the out-breath? Is one longer than the other? So it's a kind of curious, questioning investigation of the process of breathing. So now don't leave the belly. Think of this as the center, as if you dropped a pebble into a pond and little wavelets ripple out from where you dropped the pebble. Let your awareness ripple out from the belly. So more and more of the body becomes into your field of awareness. Feeling the torso, tracing how the belly is rising and falling, but also there's a kind of wave-like movement. Maybe you feel the ribs expanding and contracting, the chest lifting and falling, and with it the shoulders. Become aware of your buttocks and pelvis, your legs, all the way down to your feet. Holding the whole body in this curious, friendly, mindful attention. And with this full body awareness, you may become conscious of previously unconscious tension. Maybe, for instance, some hot spots are a clenching of the jaw or a furrowing of the brow. There may be a tightness in the shoulders or the buttocks. So if you notice any holding, any tension, see if you can soften, relax, calm the bodily formation. And again, what you might notice is, oh yes, I've had some tension in the shoulders. I relax the shoulders, and then within a few breaths, the tension may come back. You've uncovered perhaps a samskara, a habit, a pattern that you can slowly and gently release over time. And just feeling the movement of the breath through the body, aware of the body, calming and relaxing the body. Noticing what, if any, effect it has on the breathing and on the mind. bring your palms together in front of the heart. In Korean Son Buddhism, or Korean Zen, this is called hapchang. And it's a gesture that reminds us that these teachings and practices have been offered and shared generously by teachers past and present, known and unknown. But also reminds us that our practice is an offering to all those whose lives our life touches. So to remind ourselves that we do not practice for ourselves alone, I like to end with a dedication of merit. And whatever merit we generate through our practice, we dedicate and offer all of it to all sentient beings throughout the world equally. May our thoughts, may our words, and may our deeds bring benefit to the world. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. Om Ah Hum. So releasing your hands, opening their eyes. Yeah, it's a train. That's one of my bells of mindfulness. Usually when I hear the train whistle, I stop, I take a few breaths. So please feel free to write me, put comments at the bottom of this podcast. If you have any questions, again, if you have any comments, recommendations for future shows, and if you want to support the podcast, remember that you can do so in myriad ways. Commenting, clicking on like, sharing with others, giving reviews, and then of course through Dana. Dana offering is whatever you're happy to offer and share. Thanks again for joining me. I hope to see you again in Poep Sa Frank Jude.